We are joined by today's guests for our awesome snake panel. That is Dr. Nick Brandehoff and Dr. Bryan Wilson. Dr. Brandehoff is board certified in emergency medicine, medical toxicology, and additional medicine. Is that a typo there, do you think, Johns?
It's addiction.
Addiction, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, addiction medicine with a focus on... Oh, is this another typo?
No, it looks like envenomation.
Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And
Zach's not good
I'm
with
going to
big
fumble
words.
over this. Envenomation research. He's an assistant clinical professor of emergency medicine at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, as well as the president and medical director for the Asclepius, I should have gone through these words beforehand. Snakebite Foundation, a nonprofit that focuses on improving snakebite education in West Africa. Dr. Bryan Wilson is an emergency physician, pediatrician, and medical toxicologist who practices as a clinical instructor at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Dr. Nick Brandehoff and Dr. Bryan Wilson, thank you so much for joining us here at Backpacker Radio, and apologies for that very bumpy beginning to this one. That's usually how they start, though.
Yeah, no worries.
No worries. Happy to be here. Appreciate the time.
So let's start off right away. Let us know your backgrounds and how you came to your current roles.
Sure. So my background is in medicine, obviously. I actually started out my college education as an electrical engineer and then decided I wanted to do something a little bit more interpersonal. Ended up finding medicine and kind of went into it planning to do emergency medicine and then eventually do medical toxicology. I grew up in Texas, ended out in Arizona for my training, and so ended up being exposed to snake bites and snake bite patients while living out there in Tucson. And I'd always been kind of looking for a way to combine an interest in being outdoors and kind of adventure and travel with a career and with a focus. And so snake bites kind of fit that role really well. A lot of my colleagues started out their interest in snake bites with an interest in the snakes themselves, and then got to envenomation from there, and I kind of worked backwards where I really got interested in this snake envenomation, the treatment of that, and then have over time grown to appreciate the slithery friends. And so I was in Tucson for a while for my training, eventually moved to Iowa for a little bit for my wife's career, and then her career brought us here to Denver, where I followed and am back kind of into a place that actually has a lot of snake bites.
Perfect.
Yeah, and for me, I just grew up outdoors as a kid. I was always out fishing. I was like the barefoot hick that would just be outdoors at all times. And then went to college to play baseball with no intention of doing medicine, and then got interested in medicine, and so went back to school after graduating to sort of get all my prereqs done. And during that time, I actually was a venomous snake wrangler. I was like the guy you would call to come pick up the rattlesnake off your porch type of guy. And so always had an interest in reptiles and snakes.
Have you always been fearless of snakes?
Yeah, I've always been, I have some fears, but I've always been that, even as a little kid, I had very little, I would pick up everything.
I'm just going to urge you to scooch towards me so that doesn't block you on the camera.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
High production quality here.
Yeah, no worries. And then, yeah, so I was a lot of painful processes with that lifestyle of not being fearful of stuff, and then went to med school. And I think, like most people who go to med school, you feel like you're going to give up all your hobbies and fun stuff, and really got back into wilderness medicine as a way to combine. At that time, I was doing some mountaineering and a lot of climbing, and so sort of joined that together, and then went into emergency medicine with at UCSF Fresno, which has a big wilderness component to it, and at that point started getting into snake bites as a resident again, and then was told basically you got to do a medical toxicology fellowship in order to like basically have the street cred in order to treat snake bites. So I came to Denver to do my fellowship, went back to Fresno as faculty, then came back here and really just enjoyed the mentorship here, it's not really well known, but Denver has more medical toxicologists than anywhere in the world as a city.
Why is that?
We have a really robust poison center here. We have a lot of research opportunities between Denver Health, the university, Children's Hospital, and then we have some private practice stuff. Steve Mackesy, who has, he's one of the foremost world's authorities on venomics, which is the variation in venom composition, is at the University of Northern Colorado. So I've worked with him in his lab and some of his co-collaborators. And so there's just a lot of really high-end people here. We were talking about the Denver Venom Conference that's coming up this Friday. The reason we can have that conference is we have some people who don't live in Denver come and speak because we want, we get the highest quality talkers we can, but we could literally run the conference with just local people because we have such high density of people who know snake bites and do good research in snake bites.
Are people going to bring snakes to the conference?
Yes, there might be snakes at the conference. There is the behind the scenes access to the Tropical Discovery Museum area, the building. There won't be those snakes out, but the echo tour that we're doing this weekend, there will definitely be snakes there.
I've got so many ridiculous questions to ask. We've got really, really good questions. I've just got to get through a couple.
Do you want to do a couple
They
of
don't
your
have to
eyeballs?
well, my first one for the
Chauncey's to get out of her
listener.
system, otherwise she passes out.
I just wanted to know if they were going to bring snakes. I know now that they don't have snakes, but like I'm picturing, just to give you the idea I have, I'm picturing you guys have like a van, and the inside walls of the van are just cages, and there's just snakes, and that you go everywhere with them. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from. But how many snakes do each of you guys own? Do you own snakes?
I have a 4-year-old, so I actually own 0 at the moment. And my life has been nomadic enough where I haven't needed to own any, but I at any point can play with snakes. So it's not a need to own.
Okay.
Same. I can't say I own any snakes. It's more of a go find the snakes in the wild for a little bit and then leave them alone.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to find someone to watch your dog while you're out of town. If you start adding a snake to it, suddenly you can't travel anywhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
When you go to these conferences, I'll be okay after this one. When you go to these conferences, where was I going with this? Oh, okay. So we just had someone on about horses, right? And if you think of like horse girls, there's an image that comes to mind. When you think snake people, and like you think about this convention, what is a stereotypical snake person? Like what kind of traits are you like, that guy likes snakes?
Do the owners start to look like the pets as they do with dogs?
It's a really interesting Venn diagram of people who go to these conferences, because you get a combination of medical people who want to learn how to treat snake bites or who go to these. You get a combination of like really high-end PhD scientists, like world-class sort of standard academics, and then you get a really fringe area of snake people who are just weird. I don't know how to best to describe. I mean, it's such a weird Venn diagram that some of those people are totally normal and some of them are just completely out there, and we all just sort of hang out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's shocking to anybody.
No.
Yeah. Okay, I have my one oddball question. Maybe not even that odd. Before we get to the important stuff that I'm sure everyone is tuning in to hear, but I'm curious to know if either of you guys have been bitten by a venomous snake in your lives.
So I think you can cheat with that question a little bit because there are many snakes that are venomous but are not necessarily dangerous in the sense that, we kind of colloquially use the word venomous. So in the process of kind of messing with snakes and finding them in the wild, almost everyone gets a little nibble here or there. And you may have a little bit of local venom effect where you're bleeding a little bit more than you should, or maybe it feels a little funny. But in terms of like the big bad envenomations that kind of most people have in mind when they say, have you been envenomated by a snake, like from a rattlesnake or a mamba or one of those snakes, I have so far managed to avoid that and see how fortunate I can be at continuing to do so.
So what makes a snake venomous but not dangerous?
That's a great question. And you can really kind of get into the nuance of what do you mean by venomous, right? So if you talk to an evolutionary biologist, for example, they may just mean, does that snake have the genes to produce a venom? Or do they have like some rudimentary venom gland that expresses some venom? Whereas if you're talking to more of like a field biologist, they may mean, does this snake produce a venom that it uses to eat mice or crickets or other critters? And then if you talk to kind of the general public or more physician, medical toxicologists, then we typically mean, does this snake end up with you in the hospital? Does this snake pose a danger of disability or death for you? And so it comes down to kind of how much venom does the snake produce, what components are in the venom, how much venom does the snake inject when it bites you, and different species have different trends in terms of whether we consider them medically significant or venomous from a biology perspective or venomous from an evolutionary perspective. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, it's a can of worms. This is literally argued for weeks on end at some of these conferences on what is venomous and what is not venomous. So to make it simple, for example, garter snakes, which I think most people have sort of seen and don't consider to be dangerous at all, not medically significant, they're venomous. They have sort of a mid upper jaw larger tooth, and they have a very rudimentary venomous delivery system. I don't think people would be concerned about holding a garter snake. I'm more concerned about them musking than anything else.
What is that?
Basically shitting on you in a really foul smelling way.
Is that the milky stuff?
Yeah.
So it looks like they jizzed on you.
Yeah, I was going to say that happened to me recently. I was
Did it
down a
smell
trail.
terrible?
Well, I didn't get close enough. It didn't actually shit on me, but I almost stepped on a rattlesnake, and then I turned around just to witness it, and it locked eyes with me and just started shitting.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was a territorial thing or
no, it's a defensive mechanism.
Sort of like a skunk.
But you get into a lot of people consider the Komodo dragon to be venomous. That is heavily debated in the scientific circles, and probably well beyond this discussion, because there's no real right or wrong answer. There's just a lot of very, very high echelon experts in their opinions. I have my thoughts, but it's those are for the phenomics people to sort of argue at these conferences constantly.
Wait, so you can, my knowledge of Komodo dragons is the wild thornberries, but you can get bitten by a Komodo dragon and not, I imagine you'd immediately die, but you don't go to the hospital, you're not extremely unwell?
Well, the fact that they only inhabit a few islands in Indonesia that are several hour flights away from any given hospital probably puts you in a bad position to start. But there's heavy debate among, are they actually venomous? Do they have the genes to produce the venom, but they don't? Is it really the bacteria that's causing not people, but the animal, their prey to die? But that gets into what a lot of Bryan was saying about the nuance of where this lands. So in the U.S., when we speak of venomous snakes, I only consider really medically significant snakes to be truly venomous, whereas other ones they're venomous technically, but not of relevance to what we do, right? So we're talking copperheads, cottonmouths, rattlesnakes, coral snakes, and that's really it. You can get into the lizards, a little bit of Gila monsters, Mexican beaded lizards, but there's a bunch of other stuff that could be considered venomous.
Is it venomous if you get bitten by a Gila monster?
Oh yeah,
I'm leaving here with new fears.
Bryan has more experience with that.
The Gila monsters would be considered medically significant. You do see pretty significant symptoms in humans. Fortunately, not as bad as a rattlesnake. We don't typically expect you to die from a Gila monster bite, but you get some pain, you get swelling. You can get kind of this diffuse body swelling, which we call angioedema, but it almost looks like an allergic reaction, but it's just an effect of the venom. But that would be a good example of a critter that we would typically consider to be medically significant in terms of being venomous. Whereas there are plenty of other, spiders are another great example, right? A lot of spiders have venom, or as far as I know, all spiders have venom, but you never want to use absolutes. But most spiders we don't worry about when they bite us, because many of them, their teeth can't penetrate deep enough to inject us with venom. They don't have enough venom to actually be harmful for us, except for a couple of specific species. In the United States, mostly think about brown recluses and black widow spiders.
And in Colorado, we only have black widows, so no recluses to worry about.
What about the tarantulas? Don't we have like that tarantula migration?
100%. Yeah, the tarantulas are here. The migrations are going on right now. They are technically venomous. They could bite you, and you would be in some pain, probably more so than just penetration of the teeth from the venom there, but they don't really cause any real issue.
That's shocking.
So back to the garter snake thing. If a garter snake bites you, it's not medically venomous or dangerous. For what reason? Because it doesn't produce enough venom, or the bite isn't deep enough, or what in that particular scenario? Because we have them in our yard all the time, every week. What's the thing that makes that not medically significant?
It's a combination of things, really. It's so when you think of a rattlesnake, most people have seen sort of the front big fangs that sort of come out. Those basically look like needles that are used for penetrating, for IVs and things like that. They're really similar. So you get a deep penetration, you get a much larger, it's a venom gland on each, but just behind each eye, and those inject venom fairly rapidly, and that venom is designed for larger rattlesnakes for mammalian physiology to disrupt that, right? So those are all things going for a good envenomation by that rattlesnake, whereas a garter snake typically feeds on fish and toads and insects. So when the physiology of their prey is a little bit different, probably more importantly is most what we call rear fang snakes are non-front fanged colubrids. It's a very rudimentary delivery system, so the teeth are a little bit bigger. They have they're kind of grooved instead of hollow, so it's not quite like a hypodermic needle the way people think of it. And then the gland itself it's not a sac. It's like it's a bunch of small little capillary type looking features to it, and so they actually kind of have to latch on and chew in order to get that saliva in the wound. And so it's a much slower rate of venom injection into you if it does happen. So what we see mostly, people do develop some swelling and some pain and sometimes some blistering from like a hognose bite or a garter snake bite. But it's usually in the setting of a pet. You're handling some food to feed them. You smell like that thing, and then they bite, and the person doesn't want to injure their snake, so they kind of just let it chew and try to get it off. And so after
snakes chewed.
after a couple minutes, right, there's a lot of exposure. And so
There's people that are just letting them chew on them for minutes.
Yeah.
Remember the Venn diagram with snake
Full
people?
minutes. There's minutes of watching it.
Yeah, they don't want to injure their snake, and it's kind of, they got these grooved teeth, and it's like
It's kind of like your kid, if he drools on
Yeah.
you, you're kind of
It's
like,
a
all
little
right,
different.
you want to stop that. But if it's
Yeah.
someone else's kid, maybe you smack him away a little bit.
Wow. Does it work like with lizards? Could you spray it with a water bottle and it'll let go?
Yeah, there's a variety of ways. Some people pry it a little bit. Some people dunk it under water to try to get it to let go. Some people spray it. Gila monsters are notorious for latching on and not letting go. And they have a much better delivery system, and so that's where people have talked about shocking them, drowning them, shooting them, burning them.
I will say, talking to some of the Gila monster handlers at the Tucson Zoo, it sounds like a lot of their latching is more people getting bit and then flailing around. And you can imagine if you're suddenly flying through the air, you're probably not going to be inclined to let go of whatever you're hanging on to.
It's like a cat when the kitten grabs you and you're trying to get it off.
Right.
Okay, this is so fascinating. So you get bit by, we're just going to jump around here. You get bit by a snake and you're out hiking, for example. to me, I've never thought about that it doesn't immediately let go. But if I'm hiking and I've just got my backpack and my stuff and I get bit by a snake and this thing is just like chilling there making eye contact, nibbling, how do I get it to let go of me? Am I pouring my water bottle on it, or?
So I think, when you're talking about venomous snakes in biting, especially for us, they're usually defensive strikes, meaning we are large predators to them. We are a danger. And so they rarely, if ever, will bite and chew on us. They want to bite and they want to get away as quickly as possible.
Okay, that's
So
good.
the bite is the very last resort because it actually exposes them. It's kind of like a boxer punching. Like there's some opening at that point to potentially get hit back. They don't want to do that, but if they do bite, they usually hit you real quick and then try to retreat. There's actually interesting data that the length of their strike versus an offensive strike of going after a prey versus a defensive strike are different lengths.
Which one's longer? I assume offensive is
Yeah,
longer?
trying to get the mouse. You're really hungry and you want that mouse that's far away, and that mouse poses very little danger to you. You much more likely to go further versus the defensive strike. The maximum length is about half their body length.
I heard that snakes can jump up to 2/3 the length of them. Is that on target, short, or can they jump farther than that?
You mean like dunk a basketball jump?
No, just like, let's say they're jumping at you.
So, like, in terms of striking distance, I've heard between half and 2/3. That's getting a little out of my area of expertise. I don't know about the striking distance.
Yeah, the data out of Loma Linda and a few other places is it's a defensive strike is about half the body length. So you're thinking about a large prairie rattlesnake in Colorado is about 3 feet. So a foot and a half, not that far.
The reason why I was asking that is, like, when hiking in the desert, we're learning that some of the things that we've heard might be myths. But that was one of the things I had heard, because if you saw a rattlesnake, you'd obviously want to give a good distance to walk around it. And in my mind, I was thinking, like, how long are you, to decide how far to walk around it. Is that, I don't know. There's no question there.
I think, the more space, the better. But if you're kind of confined, I'd feel pretty comfortable, maybe twice the snake's body length. Just adding in a safety factor, because it's not like we're breaking out the tape measure to see how long the snake is and how far away we are. That would be kind of my rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think, again, you are a threat to them, and so they don't want anything to do with you. The myth that they chase you or anything else is complete trash. They want to avoid you. So the first thing they'll do is just try to use their camouflage. So I promise you, up in Golden, up hiking these hills here, or on your backpacking excursions, you have missed more snakes than you will ever see by a factor of like 100. Like, we actively look for them, and we miss them all the time. It is not uncommon for us to be like 10 people looking around, and we're all in a line walking like a single track to get to a spot, and like the 9th person sees the snake, right? So the first 8 just completely missed it. And so they try to use their camouflage first, and then they might warn you. Rattlesnakes being the ones that can warn you with their rattle, but some of them may bite first and then rattle because the camouflage failed. You got far too close for their comfort. They bit and then they started rattling, which is kind of a dick move on their part, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
I've heard some of them have adapted to not rattle. Like, they learn that rattling is dangerous for them and they don't rattle.
That again is heavily debated. Most biologists that I trust heavily with knowing this stuff say that's not true.
Cool.
Okay, let's ask the question that I'm sure most people are interested to hear the answer in. The scenario, you're out on a hiking, backpacking trip. For our purposes, probably most likely a rattlesnake, but it can be any large venomous snake. You get bit, you have your headphones in, the camouflage didn't work, you didn't get the warning, whatever the reason might be. You get bit, what do you do?
So, I think to start out with, probably the easier conversation is what are things you shouldn't do. So things you shouldn't do are go try to chase down, kill, capture the snake. Theoretically, you could take a picture of it from a safe distance. Honestly, it's not super necessary. But certainly your local toxicologist will love to see a picture of the snake. But we can treat you without knowing exactly what snake bit you. And then the other things you don't want to do are a lot of things that kind of made their way into some of the first aid guides and lay literature and the outdoor and wilderness first aid kind of handbooks of the past couple of decades. I think a lot of it's starting to finally fade out. But for example, we'd see things, there were recommendations to cut the wound, suck out the venom, suck out the blood. There were even little kits made with razor blades and syringes to help you do that. And we've learned that that's not really helpful at all. You don't get any of the venom out, and you just kind of create a worse wound, increase the odds of that wound becoming infected. Similarly, there is a little suction device out on the market, and all the available data suggests that it's not effective at all, and it maybe contributes to worse wounds by creating a suction injury. So don't try to get the venom out. Certainly don't put your mouth on the wound or anything along those lines. Just kind of normal cleaning of the wound, first aid for the wound.
Don't electrocute yourself, please.
Is
What
that
about-
a thing that happens?
Yes.
There are a number of strategies that have been put out with the theory of it'll denature the venom proteins, and none of them work, because at the end of the day, if you're denaturing the venom protein, you're denaturing your own proteins.
Huh.
How
And
are
they've... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
So you'd see electricity, you'd see fire, you'd see ice, kind of all the Pokemon strategies of taking out the venom. And none of them actually do anything but worsen your wound. So that the initial story of electrocuting the bite wound came out of this observation in South America that someone wrote in a lay article. Seeing a local person bitten by a snake, and then his buddies shocking him with the battery from a boat.
I was gonna ask, how do you electrocute
Well,
yourself
People
out
carrying
there?
like a taser or
So
something?
they actually
snake
sell
taser.
they sell Snakebite tasers. Like you go to Bass Pro Shops or you go to REI, and you can buy these things, and they're idiotic, and they shouldn't be on the shelves.
I
Yeah.
would think
they
it's meant
are.
for the snake. It's meant for you to tase yourself.
Yeah, to denature the protein. And I've had two similar story. I've had two farmers separately who got bit and used their F-250 and their jumper cables.
No.
And they just come in with an electrothermal injury as well as a snake bite.
Yeah. At least that way they don't die of the snake bite. They
Yeah.
die of something else.
And I've seen, I think Leslie Boyer showed me something from like 1890 as like one of the
Yeah.
first reported using electricity for this snake bite thing. So it's very well historically used, but is a terrible idea.
It was a guy who had a pet snake, had previously been bitten by his pet snake, was allergic to anti-venom, and so didn't want to get anti-venom again. So he had hooked cables up to the alternator on his car and kind of created this emergency plan that they'd run out to the car and shock him if he ever got bitten again. And unfortunately, he got tagged by his pet snake on his upper lip. And they run out, hook him up, hook his lip up to the alternator. His buddy's like revving the engine for 5-10 minutes, and then goes out and finds him unconscious, unresponsive on the ground. And he ends up at the hospital and has kind of a prolonged course. Gets anti-venom anyway, because even if you're allergic to anti-venom, you can still get it. And ultimately does fine and survives, but drastically worsened and complicated his hospital course compared to just going and getting kind of normal normal professional care.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I think the short of it is do nothing and get to the hospital as soon as you can is really the take-home point, because there's a million different sort of folklore stuff of different plants and to rub on and cut a potato in half and all these things. They're all stupid. It's really get to safety, right? Seeing safety in the outdoors is paramount. And when I say that, we just talked about how far the snake can strike, and it doesn't want to be near you. Even scooting a few feet away is fine. That snake is going to go away as long as you give it an out. Not moving the limb that got bitten, because the venom will travel through the lymphatic system. So it's one of the other ways that fluid is sort of returned to your heart is veins in your lymphatic system. So every time you move muscles, the flow increases for the lymphatic system. So you want to minimize the movement. And then we say stay calm. I'll be honest, I'd have a hard time staying calm if I knew I just got bit by a snake, but it is what it is. And then really getting to care as soon as you can. So if you're out hiking alone, that may pose a problem. Now more and more people are carrying the spots or the Garmin sort of SOS. Now SOS is even available on most phones, even if you don't have cellular service. So getting somebody to come to you as soon as possible. Or if you're with a buddy, they can, depending on how you want to do it and where you're located, things like that, they can take off and try to go get help as well. But the only effective treatment for a snake envenomation is anti-venom, and the only place we can deliver that is in a hospital. Mm-hmm. And so there's nothing else. We get hit up all the time. What can I carry? And we try to explain to people, there's nothing you can do except for do nothing to minimize movement, to scene safety, and get to a hospital. Benadryl is another one that gets bantered about all the time. Benadryl does not work for snake bites.
So if I'm hiking and I'm a mile or two from the trailhead, and it would be quicker for me to get myself to the trailhead versus waiting for either calling someone to come to me or sending someone and waiting, is it still better for me to just sit there and wait, even though it might take longer, than to use movement to get myself to the trailhead?
That's a great segue. It's almost like you read my mind. That's I was going to kind of jump in with that as a caveat. At least I would make the argument that your number one priority is getting safely to definitive care, which would be the hospital setting, as efficiently as possible. And so, at least from my perspective, I would hike out and try to get somewhere where the ambulance can get me. I would rather take that hit of hiking and maybe spreading the venom, but getting to the hospital hours quicker than kind of lay on the trail and wait for a crew to come carry you, or lay at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and wait for the helicopter to try to rescue you. And it's hard to give a definitive recommendation, but we can take extremes, right? If you are going to have to wait for an ambulance or helicopter for a day or 12 plus hours, then you should probably just hike out. If you get bitten checking the mail in front of your house and you can sit on the driveway and wait for the ambulance to grab you, then you probably should just go ahead and do that.
See, and that's where I would argue that if you're only a mile or two in, I would sit and wait. So that there's some nuance. There's a lot of nuance to these cases, but the short answer is definitive care as soon as you can, in the most efficient way you can.
Yeah. So in this scenario, this is tough because it sounds like you guys have different approaches to maybe the same problem. But I'm thinking if I get bit by a rattlesnake, if I'm hiking locally, there's plenty of places where I don't have cell service. So, I'm going to have to get out of my own manpower. Does it make more sense to hike out? Or if I'm, I have a trail running background, should I run out? Like, I know me, I would probably panic and I'd probably move as quickly as I possibly can. I'm probably moving at 7 miles per hour back to my truck and then going to a hospital. Is that a bad idea because it's going to circulate the venom faster?
I would probably walk just as a middle ground between the two options. And then from a more practical perspective, I don't know how much you would really want to be running. Okay. Regardless of whether that bite was on your foot or your hand, it's probably going to hurt, and that movement is probably not going to feel great. Additionally, one of the effects of snake envenomation, at least from rattlesnakes, is that it can thin your blood and make you prone to bleeding. And so I don't know how good of an idea it would be to be running and risk tripping and slamming your head on a rock or otherwise injuring yourself when you may or may not have this inability to clot your blood effectively.
I would argue you can. I agree with him. I would walk. I'd not necessarily say you should walk all the way to your truck. I'd say you walk to the first point of cell phone service.
Okay.
And then make that call.
Yeah.
Just while we're on the topics of things not to do, I've heard that it's not a good idea to make a tourniquet or do anything to try to slow the circulation. Is that true?
Yeah, don't do that. Just it's just a short, simple answer of no.
Should you elevate it or anything?
Now you're getting into. I would say pre-hospital without EMS involved. I would not elevate. Now, when the ambulance gets there, there's heavy debate of whether you should elevate in the ambulance or not, because the idea is you may spread that venom faster, and if you develop systemic symptoms, meaning you don't just get swelling and pain locally, you can get low blood pressure, you can get bleeding, you can get all sorts of other stuff that needs to be treated in the hospital. And so there's a big debate about whether you should elevate in the ambulance or not. So no prior to the ambulance. In the ambulance, maybe. When you get to the hospital, definitely elevate.
So, given that you guys have a huge breadth of knowledge on this, I'm curious how this impacts your experience in the outdoors. Do you always travel with a Garmin inReach or a satellite communicator or something of that effect? Is that reason for you to go out and get the latest iPhone that have the SOS capabilities? Are you just willing to risk it and be like, I don't think this is going to happen, low odds?
I think at baseline, emergency doctors were our own worst. We never take our own advice, so yeah, in reality, no. Mm-hmm. With that said, I do have, I have a decent sort of kit that I travel with for medical reasons. I don't have Anti-Venom, but I don't have the Garmin when I go trail running or anything like that. When I'm climbing, I don't have all that stuff. I probably have the normal stuff that you guys go out with. I just have more of the knowledge of probably what to do in that situation.
Yeah. But without the Anti-Venom, if you got bit by a snake, like what could be done in that scenario? I know for you it's different than the average person, but even in your case, I'm curious, without the Anti-Venom, what would you do?
I'd call a helicopter or 911. There's literally nothing else to do. I wish there was a magic pre-hospital bullet that we could do in order to treat it. We have yet to find that. There's some clinical trials on some drugs that may be beneficial that are in pill form that could delay sort of onset. They're not out. But I do the same thing everybody else does when they're out backpacking, trail running, climbing. I have my gear. If shit happens, then you deal with it at that time, because we do a lot of snakebite stuff, but in the reality, as you guys know, and everybody listening probably, like, there are so many things that can go wrong in the outdoors. Trying to carry that all on your back is not a viable option. You just got to understand what the scenarios are and how to best affect each scenario. Like if you're climbing and you lose an anchor point or something like that, or you run out rope, or we try to be preemptive with all that stuff, but it does happen. And so what do you do at that point? You just having the knowledge on how to handle each scenario is probably your biggest tool.
Another myth I've heard, and we Googled this on a previous episode, but I think, when do you get to talk to snake people? When I was on the PCT, one of the things that I always heard was that the baby rattlesnakes are more venomous than the big rattlesnakes because they don't know how to regulate their venom yet. And when we Googled that, it said that that was wrong. But what is your guys' take on that?
So the short answer is every rattlesnake or every snake bite is different in its own unique thing. So certainly we can see baby snake bites or small snake bites that end up presenting very severely, and you can have people bitten by giant snakes who end up having what we call a dry bite, which means the snake didn't even want to inject you with venom. In a general, when I've looked at the literature, what I've seen is that yes, younger snakes are bad at controlling their venom delivery, but they pretty quickly develop that ability and kind of more accurately gauge how much venom they're trying to deliver after just a couple of bites in their life. But more importantly, even if they inject all their venom, if they're a small snake, all their venom may still be much smaller than just a portion of a larger snake's venom. The other thing you'll hear sometimes about baby snakes is that they have a more hemotoxic venom, and so they have some more of the systemic symptoms we worry about, and that also has not necessarily kind of panned out in the literature. So it's kind of hard to make. I would steer people away from trying to make generalizations about snake bites based on the size of the snake or the age of the snake or things like that.
Yeah, for a visual for people, So one, you're talking after a few strikes, so within a day or so, a little bit more, they're able to control and meter their venom fairly effectively. And then you're also talking about a baby having maybe 2 Tic Tac size venom glands versus an adult that has 2 peanuts M&M size venom glands. And so theoretically, even if that snake couldn't meter its venom and it unloads all of its venom, it's still way less than half of 2 peanut size M&Ms. So it's a lot less. And theoretically, the venom of a baby rattlesnake or baby cotton or copperhead or whatever is really much more geared towards insects and lizards, so reptile physiology and insect physiology. And as it ages, that venom actually, that composition changes to more mammals, so mice, rats, whatever, squirrels. So theoretically, that should be more damaging to us. Now, this is a lot of theory. There's a lot of variables, and I agree with Bryan that each snake bite is nuanced and individual, and we see different things no matter the size of the snake. So the short answer is just don't get bit by any of them. I will tell you, if I had to have a gun to my head and take a bite from a baby rattlesnake versus a large adult rattlesnake, I would take the baby.
What... I guess take a step back for people that just have no knowledge of snakes at all. What kind of venomous snakes do you see in the U.S. and in what areas for the ones that count? Not like the hypothetically garter snakes could be, but the ones the doozies.
So from a big categories perspective, the 2 main ones we worry about are the crotalids and the elapids. So crotalids make up 99% of the venomous bites that we see in the United States. And those are some of the ones people typically think of as venomous. So all the rattlesnakes, and then copperheads and water moccasins. And then that last 1% is in the elapid family. In the U.S. are all the coral snakes, so there's 3 species. And then in terms of distribution, broadly speaking, the crotalids are pretty much all over the United States except for some small pockets like Alaska, Hawaii, somewhere in the northern Midwest that I'm blanking on right now. And then the elapids, the coral snakes, are really kind of the southern coast, Florida through Texas. And then Arizona has a coral snake that is termed venomous, but is kind of on that border between whether it's really medically significant or not. But so big picture, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, copperheads, and then coral snakes are, from a non-snake geek's perspective, what are the venomous snakes in the United States. Now, there's tons of different species of those, and you can break it out into a list of dozens of snakes, but big picture, that's what we're looking at.
For those 4, can you rank them from bad to super bad to get bit by?
I mean, I think coral snakes are its own class because they're their own type of, they're lapids, so they're a cousin of mambas and cobras, and whereas then we have our vipers or our crotalids, which are our rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouths, also known as water moccasins. Coral snakes themselves, the Texas coral snake causes a ton of pain, and usually not a lot of paralysis, though there's some geographic variation in that. And then the Florida coral snake causes paralysis, so you basically start from your head and start working your way down, and you get more paralyzed. And so that could potentially be a deadly process for you. But as far as outcomes of snake bites, the rank goes rattlesnakes, and within the rattlesnakes, it's usually the larger rattlesnakes. So the timber rattlesnake in the east, eastern diamondbacks in the east.
These are most lethal or least lethal of the...
Most.
Okay.
Yeah, so those 2 on the east coast, and then the west coast is your western diamondback, your Mojave. Your prairie rattlesnake's probably up there as well. Now, these aren't the most potent venoms. These are just usually the largest snakes that usually have the most sort of people interaction as well. And then probably under those would be your cottonmouths, which are sort of southeast area. So sort of think sort of far east Oklahoma down through North Carolina and then down through Florida. and then your same distribution almost as your copperheads, which are probably your least as a rank. With that said, again, getting to Brian's point, you can have a really severe copperhead envenomation, and you could have a really benign western diamondback envenomation. And so it's really just your individual bite and what is being done.
Have you guys watched Harry Potter?
Yes, I know it well.
Okay, so we're in the Goblet of Fire. I've got the bag with the little dragons in it, and you've got to pick one out. Which of those 4 snakes are you hoping to pull for which one's going to bite you?
I'd probably go with the Arizona coral snake if I can cheat and use that one.
Why is that cheating?
That's a strong cheat right there.
Okay, that's the one that you mentioned that was on the fringe of being medical.
It's a quite venomous snake, but it has a so coral snakes, unlike your pit vipers, like your rattlesnakes, the pit vipers have these big long front hinged fangs, right? So they open their mouth and these things sort of go real long and can penetrate deep, whereas coral snakes, all 3 species of coral snakes in the U.S. have fixed front fangs. So that's another misnomer. A lot of people think they are rear fang. They are not. They have front fangs, but they're small. They don't move at all. So they have to be small in order to close their mouth. And so the Sonoran coral snake's mouth is tiny. So in order to get bit by this thing, they're also very shy. So to get bit by this thing, you have to be incredibly motivated.
Yeah.
To do so.
I remember on the Appalachian Trail, I knew that copperheads were bad, but I was hiking with a guy that we found like a nest of them or a pile of them for whatever reason, and he was much more comfortable with snakes than I was. And what I'm about to say I don't encourage, but he was like jostling them with his trekking pole. Jostling's maybe too extreme of a word, just like moving them around with his trekking pole. And I was shocked by how docile they were. Like they were not angry. They weren't even scattering. They kind of didn't care at all. So it was just interesting for me to know that a snake that was so dangerous and venomous was something that it definitely lowered my perceived threat level of these things significantly.
You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guess that it was probably 65 to 72 degrees at that point.
Oh, I have no idea, but possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Because if you ran into sort of a bunch of them, you're probably near what's called a hibernacula, or basically where they hibernate or brumate. And so usually they start around that temperature, coming out to sort of sniff around's the wrong term, but sort of figure out the weather pattern, and then they'll go back in when it gets colder, and then as summer sort of comes on and gets warmer, they'll spread out and sort of do their thing, and then as the weather gets colder again, they start to work their way back to that exact spot, and they go in and they all hibernate or brumate together.
Yeah, don't recall the temperature, but based on your description, that sounds correct. Yeah, it was just, I need to reiterate, don't do that. Leave all animals alone, especially snakes. But it definitely was interesting for me to witness that, because in my head they were terrifying, and he was just casually playing with them. I want to backtrack to some of the bigger questions before we go on the Harry Potter
I thought that was a great question.
It was a very good question. Very good question. I want to know, I'm sure this is different for all snakes, but let's just assume the worst case scenario for maybe the common medically significant snakes. After you're bit, how long do you have before this is going to become potentially lethal?
So the short answer is very short or very long. And again, all snake bites are really individual. We have people who have, it's not necessarily an allergic reaction, but it's what's called anaphylactoid reaction. So similar sort of pathways that die fairly rapidly. We also have direct venom effect that that people can die within 10 minutes or so. That is incredibly rare. I mean, we just had the guy die in Golden in 2017, right? And so, marathon guy, I think he was a triathlete, was trail running in Golden and got tagged and died fairly rapidly. Per what I've been told from the coroner's report was he had a direct intravenous injection of venom through the great saphenous vein, which is one of the big veins in your legs. And being a triathlete the way he was, or I forget exactly, I believe he was a triathlete, he was probably had giant great saphenous vein. And so that can happen, but the vast majority take, they can take hours sometimes, depending. And you got to understand also, in the U.S., we get about 9,000 bites per year. We only get about 3 to 5 deaths. So it's not common. There's always an extenuating circumstance. There's either a direct IV injection, which does happen rarely, some allergic reaction or anaphylactoid reaction, like that kid who died in Colorado Springs last year. There's usually 1 or 2 people per year who are messing with the snake and like it bit their face. They're holding the snake and it bit their face, so then you have swelling that causes airway collapse. Sometimes, there's not uncommon to have a death from there's a religious group in West Virginia, Kentucky. They don't seek care when they get bitten, and so there's...
Can you tell us about that group? How much do you know about them?
I mean, I know enough, but I don't know them personally.
So for someone listening that's like, what's that? Can you tell us about the Appalachian snake people?
Is that what they're called?
It's something like that. That's not exact.
Yeah. No, there's a specific church that I think they only have 50 members or so now, but they used to be bigger. Are they
smaller because they keep dying of snake bites?
That's probably part of it. But they base their religious activities on a line from the Bible about holding the serpent, or I don't know the line off the top of my head, honestly. But they handle timber rattlesnakes, which is, again, one of those snakes that's not the one I want to pull out of the bag. And so when they get bitten, the idea is God's going to save them, which is, you probably have a 75% chance of living, maybe.
Is that because 75% of bites are dry bites?
No, you can still get envenomated and not die. I think we always think of the endpoint as being death, where the vast majority of envenomations in the United States are only just caused sort of local stuff, local pain, swelling, and maybe long-term swelling and pain and, disfigurement a little bit, but not death.
Okay. And in the 21st century in the U.S., snakebite for the most part is a limb-threatening disease, not a life-threatening disease. Granted, that's factoring in that you are making efforts to go get medical care and anti-venom and good critical care. But it's not like other parts of the country, other parts of the world, where snakebite is very much a more immediate life-threatening issue.
Okay. Yeah, where we work in West Africa, I mean, 25 to 30% of people die from a snake bite. There's recorded medical literature of 25% of people dying in the U.S. of snake bite. That was prior to sort of just basic health care, right? So even if you don't get anti-venom and you get supportive care with fluids and pain medication and just sort of someone watching you, you're probably going to be fine. You may have some long-term problems, but it's a limb threat. It's not a life threat. Whereas when you don't have access to any care, it's a big problem.
So, I mean, maybe one thing that would be helpful would be just to kind of give examples of a typical snake bite. And so, and give the two extremes, I guess. So if we're looking at the crotalids, the vipers, so things like rattlesnakes, copperheads, and cottonmouths, your typical bite is you get bitten. Over the next, hour to 8 hours, you start to develop a swelling, pain. You maybe develop some problems clotting your blood. You make your way to healthcare. You get anti-venom. You're watched in an ICU initially or an emergency department. Maybe you get some more anti-venom. And then after a day or two, you go home, and it probably takes you a couple of weeks before you really start feeling like you're back to full function. Now, the other extreme is what we were talking about earlier, like these sudden collapse syndromes where you're bitten, and 5-10 minutes later, for a number of reasons, you just collapse and go into cardiac arrest almost immediately. And that's extremely rare. 1%, if I was going to make up a number. Maybe Nick has an actual number from the literature in his head.
I think it's even less. It's probably around 0.3.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't worry. It's not a worry of mine until it occurs.
And then the other end of the extreme is the 25% of bites that are just dry bites. I mean, the snake didn't inject you with anything, you develop no symptoms at all. You just get watched in an emergency department for a while before we say, okay, that was a dry bite and you can go. So that's kind of the spectrum. It's anything from, yes, you need to be in the hospital, you need to be in the ICU, you need anti-venom and maybe some good critical care. But we generally would expect you to leave the hospital. We generally expect you to mostly go back to a fully functional life. Granted, some people do have some limitations in like their foot mobility or their hand mobility. There are some complications you can have with long-term disabilities, but typically we expect you to do really well. Partly just the nature of the snake bites, partly because of the quality of healthcare we have now. And then the coral snake, that less than 1% of bites, admittedly I have a lot less direct experience with them, having not practiced in Florida and not treated snakes in Texas, but kind of in my mind, you get bitten by this snake over the next couple hours to, I don't want to say up to 24, maybe as an extreme upper end, you start developing symptoms of paralysis, starting with your smaller muscles, like the muscles in your face, and then eventually going to your diaphragm. Hopefully at some point before then, you've presented to healthcare, you get anti-venom, it stops the progression of that paralysis. But maybe you end up on a ventilator in the ICU for a week or two waiting to recover. But again, expecting people to do fairly well from this, assuming they're pursuing healthcare.
Is the anti-venom the same for every different type of snake, or do you have different like flavors of anti-venom for different types of snakes?
Yes, we have the Neapolitan of anti-venoms.
31 flavors.
Yeah, so when the general class of anti-venoms, you talk about your monovalent anti-venoms and your polyvalent anti-venoms. So monovalent anti-venoms, mono meaning one, is only one snake. So a classic example for that would be boomslang anti-venom. It's specifically made for that snake. Your polyvalent is taking different snakes, different venoms, and putting it into an anti-venom and to cover a vast majority of snakes that you're targeting. Now, it doesn't cover every snake in the world. So when you're thinking about North America, we talk about anti-venom for pit vipers. There's two antivenoms in the U.S. that are available for us to use to treat snakes. That's Crofab and Anti-Vip. They're both polyvalent, so they're designed to cover a wide variety of snakes. Hopefully, would cover all of our snakes in the U.S., though there are some gaps geographically that are difficult to treat. But basically, like Crofab, for example, which has been on the market for the last 20 years, uses 4 different snakes. They use 3 rattlesnakes, and then they use the cottonmouth. And then from that hopefully will cover the other venom from different rattlesnakes. So the prairie rattlesnake's not in Crofab, but it has good coverage for that. Anti-Vip also uses a rattlesnake and then one other snake from Mexico that's also a viper, and also seems to have good coverage for the rest of the North American snakes as well. So there's different flavors. Then you get into all the different African antivenoms, all the different Asian antivenoms, all the different South American antivenoms. There's I probably have 40 different types of antivenom on my shelf at home. There's a lot. I mean, and then you get into Black Widow antivenom and stonefish antivenom. We just try to produce it for a lot of different things.
What goes in it? Because when you say like you take from 3 different rattlesnakes, what are you taking and what are you mixing it with?
Yeah, so the process for making antivenom currently is that you take some typically larger animal. I believe the majority of antivenoms right now are made in sheep or horses. There's one that I know of made in rabbits as well, but point being, you take kind of a large animal. You take venom from whatever you're trying to make an antivenom for, and you inject that animal with the antivenom. The animal mounts an immune response to the venom components, and then while it's got all those antibodies to the venom floating around in its blood, you take its blood, you take out the serum, and you kind of purify the antibodies against the venom. And the way you do that depends on kind of which product you're talking about, but that's kind of the big process. And then you take those antibodies, you inject them into a patient, and they circulate, bind to the venom components, and keep them from having their effect.
So if those animals that you just listed are bitten by one of these venomous snakes, they're fine?
They are not. So it's a good question, because the corollary to that comes up often is, well, can we just immunize humans against venom? Why bother with anti-venom? And similarly, there's a dog immunization that's available through veterinarians. The big challenge with it is, even if you make those antibodies yourself, it takes your body such a long time to ramp up production that you're not going to be able to counteract that sudden influx of venom. Our immune system is meant to fight infection, so it's tailored to fight a system where a pathogen comes in and slowly over a day or two replicates, and you have time to mount an immune response. That's not what happens with a snake bite. With a snake bite, all the bad guys have shown up immediately, and you're just kind of caught without a chance to respond. So it doesn't really pan out as a protective strategy. You really have to kind of concentrate those antibodies for it to be an effective treatment.
Why do you have to take it from a sheep or like a horse or a bunny? How come, like, if a human gets bit by a snake, couldn't they take some antibodies while they're at the hospital and then make anti-venom from that? Or are sheep and horses doing it better?
Well, it's purely it's a mass production issue, right? So a large 1,000-pound horse is going to be able to produce a lot more antibodies per withdrawal of their blood versus a human. And there's no good evidence that we actually mount much of an immune response at all to a single dose, right? These horses are being systematically injected, very small amounts, and sort of built up over time to harvest those antibodies. So it's really, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of horses. There's a lot of sheep, because you gotta realize these are very small molecules. You gotta harvest the blood, get the serum, spin it down, try to isolate the antibodies you actually want versus the antibodies that you don't want. And that's a hard process. And then you got to take that and cleave those antibodies to make a Fab or a Fab2 fragment to limit allergic reactions. And even with all that and really smart scientists, we still only, like, for example, I think it's Antivip, 70%. I think Antivip and Crofab, it's around 70% of it is still proteins that we don't want. It's really, really, really difficult process. And it's still the same process we've been doing since 1894. Like, the first person to make anti-venom for snakes was a French immunologist working in Vietnam, and a bunch of people got bit by cobras, and he was like, I think I can work this out. And he worked it out, and it functioned. Literally the same process. A little bit more sort of, we've updated the operating system, but we're still working on very, very old sort of techniques. And we don't have a better way right now. There's a lot of people working in the labs right now with a whole bunch of different potential techniques for synthetic antivenom or plasmid integration into bacteria or plants to be able to produce the exact antibodies we want, nothing else, and all sorts of other chemical, like all these things. Until it's proven to be beneficial, we'll still continue the same process.
Are you optimistic that we'll have something superior, that like maybe everyone that's going hiking could just take like a small like insulin shot injection to protect themselves in that sort of scenario?
I think it's on the horizon. I don't think it's close to being to market. But I think a lot of really, really smart people are working on it.
Is it true that there's not like you mentioned it in terms of the production capacities, but I've heard that not every hospital will have anti-venom and that sometimes it can be hard to get. Is that a myth or is that true?
Certainly not every hospital will carry it. A lot of times it's going to be an economic consideration for that hospital. So I was in Iowa for a couple of years. The hospitals there are not going to carry anti-venom just on the off chance that the one snake bite that is going to happen in the state in a decade is going to come by and see them. Whereas when I was in Arizona, the majority of hospitals around Arizona are going to carry at least some initial antivenom to start treatment before they transfer the patient. So a little bit of it is just, do they see enough of the patients to warrant carrying antivenom? And then depending on what deal they have with the manufacturer, some may want to see enough volume where they're not going to end up having to send it back or have it expire on them. So some of it's an economic consideration.
I was going to ask if it expires.
Yeah, well, technically everything expires according to the FDA. We've done good lab data showing very old antivenom is quite stable and still effective. So I would use old antivenom if that's the only thing I had.
Is there a resource available to see which hospitals near you carry antivenom? So, like, in the scenario where you're transporting yourself, you're not showing up to a hospital, they're like, sorry, you went to the wrong hospital. Seems like a bad way for that to play out.
So probably the best resource I would point anyone to would be your local poison center. I mean, maybe I'm biased. We're toxicologists. We have to plug the poison center. But 1-800-222-1222 gets you to your local poison center. Free number, works everywhere. And the poison center, I mean, I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second,
Sure.
but the poison centers are really an amazing resource if you think about it. When you call your poison center, you get a nurse or a pharmacist who has special training in poisonings and overdoses, and that includes envenomations. And so you call, you wait like 10, 15, 30 seconds, someone picks up and they give you great high-quality advice. And the fact that we have something like that in healthcare is amazing, because certainly you can't call someone and get advice on your iPhone or your car within 10 or 30 seconds. So that's who I would call. They probably know locally which hospitals carry antivenom and can guide you, and then they can also call ahead, give them a heads up, help walk them through it. I don't know, Nick, do you know of any like apps where they can go check personally?
Yeah, so BTG, who makes CrowFab, has an app called Snakebite 911 that you can have on your phone, and has a map of hospitals that carry antivenom. Now, this was, to be honest, a much better app for this when there was only CrowFab on the market, because it could sort of tell you. But now Antivip came on the market in late 2018, and a fair number of hospitals have switched over to using only Antivip. Those hospitals don't show up on the Snakebite 911 app because it's not a BTG medication. And so it may miss hospitals between where you are and where you think you should go versus a local hospital who carries Antivip. I think both drugs are effective and safe, and I don't put one over the other. I think whatever you have is what you should be getting. So that could be a hole in that app, but it could be a resource if you look at it and there's a hospital that's right there. To be honest with you, I would take all that out and just call 911 and get the ambulances. Also, the EMS system should know who has what as well. I think the poison center is a great resource as well, but the ambulances should be good. Where most snake bites occur, the vast majority of snake bites in the U.S., hospitals in that area have antivenom. It'd be very rare, for example, in the Colorado area for a hospital to not have antivenom.
Good to know.
Jumping back to poison centers before we leave that topic too quick, I imagine you have some crazy stories from a poison center. What's the craziest thing you've seen happening with the poison center? You probably have like nuts stories.
I feel like every time someone asks that, that's when your mind goes blank on every story you've ever had. The one that comes to mind, we got a call about a dog getting into some anti-gopher pellets. And so these pellets, when they get exposed to the stomach, will kind of release an irritating, dangerous, poisonous gas. And so the dog gets into the gopher pellets. The dog goes to the vet. Everyone's worried about the dog at the vet. The dog vomits in the vet's office, and now the people in the vet's office are ill from the gas. So the poison dog barf is a good story that comes to mind.
Yeah, there's a similar story out of New Mexico of somebody in a suicide attempt drinking zinc phosphide, which is what these gopher pellets are. And basically the gas, when it hits water, converts to something called phosphine, which is a very, very dangerous gas. And so this guy, EMS, picks him up, brings him into the hospital. The guy's dead, like he dies, but he you know, there's a gas buildup that occurs, like it's like chugging a Diet Coke, and so the guy off gases, and then they have to shut down the entire emergency department because now this super noxious. It smells like rotting fish, very and a medically dangerous gas as well has just cleared the entire place.
Wow.
I mean, people need to realize with poison centers and medical toxicology as a whole. We cover a very wide spectrum of medicine, right? So you're talking not just envenomations, which is really my interest, but we also get calls for all, you know, overdoses. So your standard overdoses, your Tylenol, your TCAs, your other drugs. But we get really weird stuff as well, right? Also all radiation exposures, bioterrorism, occupational health stuff. So, you know, farm animal, you know, accidental medications that were meant for farm animals to people now. Like there's such a wide breadth of knowledge that we have to know that we get really weird calls sometimes, and really weird locations. Like the farthest I got is I got a call from Antarctica, and I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do with like no resources in Antarctica? Like,
Yeah.
You mentioned THC overdoses. I'm under the impression, again, a lot of what I know seems to be myths, but I've always thought you can't overdose on weed. Are you just getting like super stoned people calling you because they're panicking?
well, I said TCAs, so not THC.
Oh, okay.
So TCAs, tricyclic antidepressants, but
Okay, that's different.
we certainly get. The short answer is the dose makes the poison, so you can overdose on anything, including water. Right? So we see those people doing those 5-gallon challenges and dying at the radio host stuff. As far as we know, there's been no attributable death to THC, but there's certainly people who, yes, they get far too stoned and get, you know, they have all sorts of complications from it. They usually end up being fine, but yeah, you can overdose on anything.
Particularly with kids, it becomes a problem. You know, in a lot of states now, cannabis is either decriminalized or legalized. And so you see a lot more ready access to edibles. And unfortunately, a lot of these edibles are made to look like chips or Sour Patch Kids or candy.
My weed edibles taste better than Sour Patch Kids.
And, you know, the downside to that is no one's perfect. You end up dropping your edible somewhere by accident, and the kid will find it, and they'll get into it. And those doses can be pretty up there, especially if you're a small child. So you do see kids occasionally who unfortunately end up in the hospital. They are so sedated from the cannabis that they end up in the ICU or maybe even intubated. And then probably unexpectedly for a lot of people, you can see seizures occasionally from it, particularly in young kids. So while certainly kind of your classic joints from the 70s probably didn't overdose a lot of people, these newer higher potency products are potentially an issue, particularly for young kids.
I want to
those
go
on your top shelf.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of kids, I want to go back to a scenario where a snake bite occurs. Let's say you're hiking with either a kid or a dog, and maybe these are two separate conversations, but let's say that they're bit by something like a rattlesnake. Is the right move to carry them out, or are we still going with the same practice of, you know, trying to remain as still as possible, get to the closest point with cell service, and awaiting for the health professionals to come to you?
I would probably do a mixture. I would probably do the get to cell service and make the call, but I'd also start to make my way to the meet point with a kid, as long as they're able to carry them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you got a 5th grader who's 90 pounds, that might be an issue. Same thing with a dog. If you got a 140-pound Great Dane,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably not going to be able to carry him out very far versus like if you're hiking with a Yorkie.
Yeah.
You know, dogs are unique in that they get bit on the face more than most because, you know, they put their nose in everything. And so that poses a unique airway challenge sometimes. So that might become more of an issue versus a kid who's putting their hand somewhere or accidentally stepped on the snake or something like that.
Mm.
Admittedly, there's no doggy 911, so you're kind of on your own.
Yeah, I
for
guess
that
so.
one.
What happens there? You have to go to like a veterinarian
You need,
clinic,
to
or
go,
what?
you need to go to emergency vet.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't give the anti-venom at a hospital, or they wouldn't even have the appropriate anti-venom.
Oh,
A
yeah, is it
veterinary
the same?
hospital would potentially have it if they've got an emergency department or
Mhm.
or an animal ICU.
Okay.
Your local human hospital probably would not be able to help you with that.
Okay.
Yeah, the emergency veterinarians, you should carry some anti-venom. Now, to be honest, there's a lot of misinformation in the veterinary field as well as far as treating snake bites is concerned. There's some very, very knowledgeable veterinarians about treating snake bites, but it's much more common practice in veterinary care to see them give Benadryl and steroids and other things that we know that aren't beneficial.
Mm.
And to be honest, a lot of them is an economic decision as well. People are much less likely to pay several $1,000s for their dog to be treated rather than their kid.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Chance, we're getting near the end of our time here, so I want to open up the floodgates for you to go crazy with these questions.
Do you have any snake jokes?
Oh, well, I should have snake jokes.
I feel like I had one and I lost it.
Yeah.
We'll circle back.
I feel a little embarrassed, honestly.
That's all right. We can come back to this.
You're the dad. You should have these ready.
I know.
Are you familiar with Nate Bargatze?
No.
He's a very popular comedian now. This was one of his earlier things. It's not like a punchy joke, so I'm not even going to try to tell it, but he's saying he's with a friend, and his friend advises him that if he gets bit by a snake, to capture the snake and bring it to the hospital to him with him. He's like, "Who told you that? The snake? Like, this thing's going to keep biting me."
Okay. Have you ever played Fuck, Marry, Kill?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to go rattlesnakes, copperheads, and water moccasins. You got to fuck one, marry one, and kill one.
Oh, you're getting into some weird bestiality shit.
Yes.
I mean, I enjoy swimming, so I guess I'll marry the cottonmouth.
That wasn't on the list.
It was. It's a
Is
water
it-
moccasin.
are those the same thing?
Same thing.
Oh, okay.
Exact same thing. Different.
Okay, so we're
Just
marrying water
different
moccasins.
for vernacular.
Yeah.
I guess kill the copperhead and fuck a rattlesnake. That's gonna get out on the internet now, and I'm gonna be very weird.
We'll put that on the website.
I know. Foundational director of ASF fuck snakes.
We'll clip that for the socials.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Okay, if you could see any snake in the wild, what snake would you pick and why?
A golden tree cobra.
Why?
So Pseudohage goldii. It's so there's the black tree cobra, which is Pseudohage nigra, and then there's Pseudohage goldii, and they're not an actual mixture, but they're akin to a mixture between a forest cobra and a mamba, green mamba. So they live primarily in the trees, but they are so incredibly fast and strong. And they are incredibly rare. So even like the most well-versed field herpetology people who can just find snakes at a moment's notice have an incredible time trying to find these snakes. And so it's kind of like my Everest, where we go herping in West Africa. Like, I want to find this snake. I don't know if we ever will, but that is the snake.
Hell yeah.
How many of them exist?
Nobody knows. It's
Well,
like
it's
it's
a
like
good
the
point.
elusive snake.
Yeah. Like the Bigfoot of snakes.
Yeah.
What's your trophy snake?
I don't know. I'm admittedly not one of the snake people. I'm just kind of
Oh, yeah,
learning
you
them.
came
They're
there
all
after.
like,
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to find a prairie rattlesnake in Denver since I've only been here for a few months. So
And
I
hopefully
feel like
not-
That's pretty lame.
Yeah, and hopefully not fuck it.
Okay, let's say we're making a March Madness bracket of snakes. And in each section, like, it's snake versus snake. One snake wins, other snake does not win. What snake is coming out ultimate victor?
Wait, so are we talking most venomous snakes to humans, or are we talking snake on snake warfare?
Snake on snake
Ooh.
warfare. We're having a battle of the snakes.
I mean, I think that has to be the king cobra.
He's alpha snake. What
think
about like the giant like anacondas? That wouldn't win over king cobra?
Well, you got to understand, king cobras can get massive, right? So, 14, 15 foot is not uncommon, and they can get up to 18 feet.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I'm talking thick as my calf level, and they're also the reason they're called king cobra. So anything king in the snake world eats other snakes. So they're highly venomous. They're massive. They're incredibly intelligent. People have said that they have the intelligence of a 3-year-old. Their problem-solving skills, and I've seen them work. They're working out the problem. I feel like the king cobra has to come out.
It's good enough reason for. Oh, I don't like that.
That's not a king cobra.
Oh, it's not?
What's
That's
that?
a forest
Google
cobra.
thinks
That's
it
a
is.
forest. Yeah, Google's
Oh, he
often
looks
wrong.
scary.
Yeah, I believe that.
I have some pictures I'll show you guys later of
Okay.
like some really large king cobras.
What are some like
What
fun?
about this guy?
That is a king cobra.
He doesn't have any teeth, which is kind of nice.
No, he does. He does.
Hiding them. What are some like rapid fire snake facts you can give us? Just like
And or mix in, as you please, the most common snake myths. Like we talked about the baby rattlesnake being more dangerous, like things that people believe or things that people don't know about.
yeah, like one time we heard that horses could smell electricity. That one's out for debate. But like shit like that, but snakes.
I think it's interesting that pit vipers in the U.S., so those pits that they get their name from are heat sensing, and they can actually see the difference between 0.02 degrees Celsius changes. So they actually basically have infrared.
Like
sight.
Predator.
Yeah, basically. So like, it's like, oh, it's dark out, they can't see me. Their eyesight's actually pretty terrible, but they really can see you. Like, and they know exactly where you are.
Damn.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Yeah, I think the biggest myth I always like to dispel, we kind of hit on it earlier, but snakes get this bad rap, like, oh, they're chasing me, they're hunting me, they're after me. And, I never professionally wrangled snakes like Nick did, but I've taken some courses on how to, like, put them in a bucket and kind of get them where they need to be. And those things are trying to run away from you the whole time. You're not, like, fending them off. You're, like, trying to chase them down and catch them. And so just to emphasize, like, the snake doesn't want anything to do with you. If you leave it alone, it'll leave you alone. That's kind of one of the bigger myths I like to dispel. And then Nick can fact check me on my snake facts because I probably believe some false things. But their forked tongue is pretty neat because they use it as a kind of a directional chemical sensor. So like each end of the fork is measuring chemicals the same way our nose is measuring chemicals. So they're kind of smelling, but with stereo smell. So they can kind of figure out what direction something is, essentially by its smell, but using their tongue instead of their nose.
So they're smelling their prey with their 2-pronged tongue?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy.
And the fork, the left-right is like the left is higher density of scent, and so I'm going to drift that way. And sort of same thing with the pit vipers where they're able to see the infrared, so they bite a mouse, that mouse takes off. They could both smell it stereoscopically, but they also are looking at the heat trail, so they sort of track it down that way.
Wow.
Have you guys ever done any snake pranks? Like how people will put like the fake snake on the string or hide.
Snake in a can?
Yeah.
Well, we have access to real snakes, so
I know. That's why I want to know what kind of pranks you guys are pulling.
I'm sure I have. I can't off the top of my head remember anything that was good. I mean, we when we travel to West Africa, there's a lot of downtime, so we end up playing pranks on each other, not infrequently, but we try to avoid snake pranks specifically, just because causing sort of negative reactions in those scenarios. You don't want somebody to freak out or get conditioned to freak out, because you could be hiking looking for snakes, and then if they like have a subconscious sort of reaction, you don't want that to happen on the trail.
Fair.
Or condition them to think it's a prank.
Or condition them to think it's a prank and it's actually like a mamba at their face. Yes, that would be bad.
Have you put much thought into why people tend to be so afraid of snakes? Do you think, is this an evolutionary thing?
So it's not an evolutionary thing. It's actually really interesting. So everybody thinks it's like evolutionary. It's actually very much a conditioned response. So they've done studies with monkeys and apes with babies, and the baby doesn't care about the snake. It watches the mom's reaction to the snake, and the mom will, as a defense. So it's a learned behavior, and we've done similar stuff with human babies as well. And babies aren't scared of snakes; they're not like freaking out
Who are
about
the parents that are putting their babies in? I guess with the garter snake, that's not a big deal. But
I mean, I got videos of my 3-year-old picking up garter snakes, like it ain't no thing, right? And it's really whether it's a big reaction by the parents or just that subtle reaction that they pick up on that over time, and society sort of instills that fear of snakes. We also have a very long history of theological sort of intervention of how bad snakes are and things of that nature, and so it's sort of a learned fear.
Well, we're already past the time that we promised you this would be. That's usually how it goes here. My apologies.
Oh, you're good. We got time.
It's been a blast.
Yeah, obviously want to plug the organization that you guys are working with. So please let people know where they can find more about that, what you guys do, all the good stuff.
Yeah, so me and Bryan and several other herpetologists, physicians, just random volunteers, we are the Asclepius Snakebite Foundation. We're an international organization of researchers and healthcare workers trying to improve snakebite care worldwide. Snake bites are it's a Category A neglected tropical disease. For example, some of our work in Guinea, we get 9,000 bites here with 3 to 5 deaths. They get 20,000 bites with about 5,000 deaths. So it's a big deal for them with very little access to effective care. And so our goal is to take a multi-pronged approach to both herpetology and conservation, public education, looking at the different venom components and doing a lot of venom research that way, and then training and resources for healthcare. So providing anti-venom, building clinics, training the local healthcare workers, and really working with the local community to sort of build that hub where then they can train others in the region to provide adequate care. And so if anybody is more interested and wants to either learn more about us, or we're a 100% volunteer organization and function off of donations, they can go to snakebitefoundation.org and learn more about what we're doing.
Awesome. Great. Well, this has been, we knew this would be good, and I think it exceeded both of our expectations. So thank you very much for coming to Backpacker Radio Studio and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Thanks for having us. It was a great time.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Thanks, guys.
To the Trek propaganda portion of today's show, the article that I want to highlight is a guest post. I don't know if we've ever featured a guest post in the past, but the title of this one is A Camera as Company Through Hiking in Scotland with a Panoramic Camera by Laura Partain. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Not sure how badly I could butcher that one. But we have a link in the footer of the website where people can submit their one-off stories. We have people who want to share a journey that they've done, but they're not interested in being a writer and having it be a continued thing. So this is the perfect way to go about this. And holy moly, this one is incredible. Obviously, the guest post route can be somewhat of a mixed bag, but this one is amazing. The gist of this one is she hiked across Scotland, not just the West Highland Way, but she tacked on a couple of extra trails on top of that, shooting with her Film Fuji TX1 camera, which outputs panoramic shots, and they are stunning. Laura is a designer by trade, I believe, and has a strong artistic sense, and I expected the photos in this one to be amazing. They are, but it's also incredibly well written. So if you want a detailed portrayal of Laura's journey through Scotland and perhaps some fuel for your bucket list adventures, definitely check this one out. Let's do a question of the day. we flip things. So
Yes.
let's. The question of the day is: what is your go-to excuse for getting out of work? And this is a little dangerous right now because
No, this is easy.
Okay.
This is the easiest question we could ask.
Yeah.
It's the podcast. I have the podcast.
Okay.
3 times this week I'm leaving work early for the podcast.
That excuse wouldn't fly with me.
Well, no, you can't use that because I mean, your question, you'll get your turn. You have it a little more complicated.
I'm saying I don't know how it would go over with me if you said you couldn't come to the podcast because you had a podcast.
Right, but this, in my mind, this isn't work. This is fun.
Okay, cool.
And I'm going to try to keep it classified that way for as many years as I can.
Good.
But no, for my job, for the 9 to 5, for the one that I would not do for 6 months unpaid.
Yeah.
That one I 3 times a week this week, going to the podcast, got to leave early by last week.
It's a good company that allows that as an excuse.
Well, to be fair, I do pick up weekend shifts. They have like overtime kind of hours. You can't have overtime, so you have to cut your hours in the week to work the weekend shifts. And they select like different people each week for them. So my excuse is that I have the podcast, so I'll work a weekend shift or a late shift one night during the week, and then I have to cut my hours somewhere. So that gives me the excuse to leave early on certain days.
How many times have you used it and you didn't have a podcast?
So this is why it's safe. This is why it's actually really safe, is I've never lied about it.
Okay.
And once I realized that, I felt
it?
really good. No,
Yeah.
I've never thought to use that as an excuse to just do something else.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I was like, this is the perfect answer, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be good at lying about that.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely something that would go under the radar should something come up in the future, which I never really thought about.
Yeah. But you've got to have something that you use to get out of work. Whether this is something that you've done in the past, maybe you were an irresponsible teenager, whatever it might be. What was your go-to, I can't make it to work?
It's hard because...
And you were probably just hungover.
You get a
I
new...
can sense your hesitancy in saying
You
this.
get a new array of excuses on your options list when you have a dog.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous for me to say because the entire duration I've had my dog has been with one company.
Okay.
But like
in a hypothetical world,
you can't control like what a dog might eat in another room,
Yeah.
and having to take it to the vet.
I sense you being very careful with your words right now.
Should something like that ever happen?
I've never seen Tron's tiptoe quite so
I
much.
can't.
in my
Well,
life.
because if there's people from work that listen to this.
Yeah, okay.
I can't remember why I would have used that, but I
Yeah.
remember saying that one time.
I'm giving you an out. I can say that you can go back to a job that you're no longer employed by. I'm sure you've lied about getting out of work
Yeah, but now
with
I
a
gotta
company that
remember
doesn't
what.
currently employ you.
I mean, those have always just been like, I'm sick.
Yeah.
I'm sick.
Yeah.
It's easier when you work from home because you really don't need to fake off work a lot. You just need to not be detected.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because if you have to go back into the office the next day and you have to kind of fake illness to make it seem like you're still coming
it's
off
so
of it.
hard.
Yeah. It does change things.
Yeah. But also, you also can't get away with staying home because you have something that could be contagious.
Yeah.
Because your computer is at home.
Yeah. I think sick is the obvious one. There's a million different directions with that. I'm curious to know, how long is the testing positive for COVID thing going to be a thing? Is this just it forever?
That's no longer a viable excuse.
You don't think you could say I tested positive for COVID and someone would be like, yeah, don't come in?
Well, yeah, but I'm assuming you have sick days, or you work you either have sick days or you work somewhere that doesn't give sick days.
Yeah.
But at least for my company, we used to have a special code that you could put in as a manager if one of your reps had COVID, because it would give them a week that wasn't counted against their sick days for the COVID. Now we don't use that code anymore because it's not... I don't know why it would be less important to get it now versus then, but...
People have... Well, it seems the virus is less bad by a lot, and also people have just psychologically adapted. And from my perspective, people just see it as a cold.
Right. So they don't... I mean, I thought it was nice when they would give you the week, but I don't understand why, if you're still got to isolate for a certain amount of time...
Yeah. I'm curious if anyone still does that. I guess that's my question.
I think they've come out with like something saying it's less time.
Yeah.
Several times.
That's the right call.
So,
Yeah, well, I'm self-employed and I've got kids, so I have a lot of excuses, but I also have no reason to really lie about anything.
Well, what's funny is sometimes when I'm telling the truth about something, like my headset wasn't working one day, so I had to go to the Golden office to pick up a new headset, which also was like hours in my workday that I wasn't working. And then parked in the Golden parking lot, there were nails. And so a nail went into my tire, and then my tire was flat, and I had to drive it to a Golden like tire shop. And I'm taking photos of everything, and just like my manager's not asking.
Yeah.
I'm just sending them to him because I'm so panicked that he's going to think I'm lying about this string of events.
Yeah.
So I feel like whenever I'm not lying about something, I worry that someone's going to think I'm lying.
Sure.
Which is healthy.
From the employer's perspective, generally speaking, if somebody's not constantly making excuses, I would never even think to care about the details of something.
It's funny because when I was a manager, like I never cared about anything. They'd be like, oh, I can't come in today. And I wouldn't even care why. Like, you have the time off, fine. And so it's funny seeing it from that perspective and being like, wow, people can really just not say anything.
Yeah.
And I am a psycho.
Yeah. It's either you're doing your job or you're not doing your job. And if you're not doing your job, you're probably going to lose your job at some point, and not because of you being sick too much.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of the perspective that I've got.
So how do you get out of work?
Yeah, I'm sure I used the sick thing a lot in college when I was although I don't think at that age, even if I was hungover, I was still fine. You know, now the hangovers are debilitating.
What about like these days? Like, because obviously you report to you, but let's say you have other people you have to work with on a certain day. Do you just email them like, oh, I don't feel like doing shit today? Or do you say, the babies are being so bad?
I did fuck up my calendar recently and had to bail on something. I didn't have to. I chose to bail on something, and I just had personal reasons. And I took it as a mental health day, which I think is warranted given the stretch that we've gone through. Sleep's much better, so I'm feeling we're doing good. TV. We're doing good. Got a new TV. I'm making less irrational anger decisions, which is nice for everybody. But yeah, no, I literally got out of a call recently because it didn't seem that important, and I went golfing. It was like the first fun thing I had done in 3 weeks, and I just totally blanked on it. And by the time I realized it, I had already booked it. And I'm just like, I'm not going to ruin the one fun thing that I've had to look forward to for 2.5 weeks for a call that's not that important. So I just had personal reasons.
Yeah, I feel like I would feel more guilt playing hooky to play golf, working for myself than for a company. For a company, it's like, but for myself, then it's like...
Because I don't really care what anybody thinks about me because I don't have the risk of getting fired. So that there's a lot of downsides to being an entrepreneur, but that is definitely one of the pluses, is I don't have to bullshit anybody.
You don't beat yourself up in your mind all the time?
No. I mean, wow. I do, but not in the ways that maybe other people do. Yeah, we can leave it at that. Do you have this one thing?
Thing of the week.
We don't have to improvise. I'm excited for the Triple Crown because this is a really oddball question.
Yeah.
And I actually put some time into
I came up with this one. I asked my whole team at work. No one could think of anything good.
You invented this?
No, I didn't. I never invented. I don't have an original thought. No, I found it on the internet.
Okay, well, I'll introduce it. This was originally the question of the day, and we flipped the Triple Crown question of the day because I thought it was interesting. So the Triple Crown of... I don't even know how you phrase this. Situation where money isn't an issue and you get to buy one item, whatever you want, as long as it fits the following criteria. It's over $1,000. I think that part is the easiest.
That's the hard. Well, that's hard.
Okay. Non-living.
Yes.
And you have to be able to lift it. That's the hardest part.
That is the hardest part.
So the Triple Crown of that.
Yeah. 3 things. Over $1,000 non-lifting, and you have to be able to lift it.
Yeah. I'm so dumb that like the first 10 things I rallied off was like a jet. Like, yeah, I'm not lifting a jet.
Yeah. Well, my first one I think you might argue with me on, but I really think I could do it.
Well, we might have to test this out, but go ahead.
Vespa. I want a Vespa. I want a moped. I want to be a little moped girl.
How heavy is a moped?
I think I can lift one because you got to lift it up to go
around
over curbs.
150 to 200 pounds.
Easy.
We should go to the gym and have you deadlift.
We should go to the sidewalk. Have me lift up someone's Vespa. I'll get shot.
I'm 185.
Well, let's say you get to a curb. You got to lift the Vespa to put it on the curb. I've lifted a moped to put it on a curb before.
Okay. We should see if you can lift me.
You want to?
But I don't know how because it can't be like a piggyback. I have to get into the shape of a Vespa, and you have to. No, we're not going to.
Yeah, you have to get to the level of Vespa too. So you'd have to probably curl into like a U shape on
Yeah.
the table, and then I could lift you like
But we
carrying
could,
a child.
We could go to the gym, load a 175-pound
Sure.
barbell, and you deadlift it.
Well, I'm not going to be lifting a Vespa from the pavement. I'm going to be lifting it probably from like the seat area.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have to put the bar on a bench.
I would think that the deadlift motion would be easier. I don't know.
How long
But
do I have to hold it for?
I'll give it. I'll
Okay,
give it to
I
you.
want a Vespa.
I'll give it to you. I won't fight you on that, even though I just did a little bit. Cool. Yeah, that's a good one. I have a similar one. So do I have enough to avoid it? Let's see. I'll start with something else, anyways. I'm gonna go with. Okay. Given that I gave you shit for this one, I'm regretting it because I don't even know if this exists. But given the scenario, it sounds like I'm very rich, so I'd commission it. But I very badly want an Iron Man suit, like a somewhat a somewhat functioning Iron Man suit.
So what do you mean by somewhat functioning? What
Like,
functions does it do?
I don't need to go to space. I realize that's kind of insane, but like all the
Jetpack?
AR stuff, definitely jetpack. Like I want to be able to get at least 10 feet off the ground. I want like the Zuckerberg. Have you seen the little like water jetpack
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got? I want it to be able to do at least that. I want the augmented reality where it's like interfacing and running calculus and telling me like that's an evildoer or something. I want it to be whatever sort of carbon titanium body that it is. It needs to look awesome. I think Elon Musk has like he has an Iron Man suit in SpaceX's office or something like that, but it looks really tacky. Like I want one that I can wear and function.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my first pick.
Okay.
My second one, I'm not the biggest art fan or snob of any kind, but given the constraints that we've got here, that was one of the first things that jumped out to me. And for not being a fan of art, I really do enjoy Van Gogh. To be able to buy Starry Night and display that in my house, I don't know how you say no to that.
Sure. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. And that's got to be worth, if I get in a pinch, I don't know, 9 figures.
So we're kind of on the same trend here. My second one, it was going to be like either like a handful of Taylor Swift's awards or like something that I don't actually really care too much about owning myself, but I would have huge resale value.
So take her awards
And
from
I'd
her.
It was that or a really, really, really big diamond.
Yeah.
Like the biggest one I could carry.
I thought about diamonds too, that there's just a lot of blood involved with that.
Okay, what about gold? Like the biggest gold rock I could lift.
Yeah.
That's pure.
Probably like a moped.
And I
size.
want this gold sourced from like one of the highest quality gold areas. I want Georgia gold or Australia gold.
I'm curious now if the value of the gold that you can lift is worth more or less than Starry Night.
Oh, how much is gold per pound?
Probably gold has it, but I'm curious how much is gold per?
Because like if you're gonna sit there and let it appreciate, I could just use it
$22,000, $22,372
per pound.
Yeah,
Holy shit! Okay, I'm
That's-
definitely
that's-
getting a giant gold rock.
and we're saying you can lift 150.
No, who says that? I could lift more.
Okay,
I can lift more.
180.
I don't know. It's just all. I could lift a 200-pound person up.
That is $4 million. I think.
How much is Starry Night?
It's got to be. I don't think it's in a museum, so it hasn't been sold in private.
I think it would go for over $4 mil.
I saw some of these paintings were going for like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good pick.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder.
But, however, if it's the apocalypse, I imagine something like art depreciates pretty quickly, and something like gold might hold its value better. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that too. Well, I think we would all be kind of screwed in that case.
Yeah.
This might be cheating, but what about like the deed to a really, really, really nice house signed in my name?
Yeah, sure.
'Cause I can hold the deed.
You would own the deed, but you wouldn't get the house.
Why not? If it's signed to me.
Because the deed is just symbolic of the thing that you want, and you can't lift the house.
But if I own the deed, don't I ipso facto own the house?
We're gonna have to have people weigh in on this one, because
Okay. What about a hoverboard?
because then I could do that with my jet example too.
Yeah, fair. I'm cheating. What about a hoverboard that works really well?
Yeah.
I could lift that maybe.
I bet you could. I bet some hoverboards go for less than $1,000.
No, I don't want one of those. I want
Yeah.
one that like shoots lasers.
Buy hoverboard with lasers.
Or like a real working lightsaber. Like an actual laser one that would cut off your arm.
Yeah. I can't
'Cause
give you
that
shit
would-
because I asked for an Iron Man thing, so I kind of took us into science fiction already.
I'm not doing this because I'm like nerding over Star Wars or anything, but that would be very useful should we face an apocalypse.
Yeah. I'm sure the government's got something to that effect.
Or
Wait,
like one of
so
those
are
Star
you-
Trek laser
Are
guns.
you on honorable mentions or are you doing actual draft picks now?
I don't know. I'm just saying things I want.
Okay. My last one is, I was going to say, so the most expensive e-bike, I looked it up, is $80,000.
Ooh.
I think it was like 150 pounds. And this particular one is carbon fiber, lightweight, aerospace, aluminum, titanium, and magnesium. It goes up to, on a single charge, it'll do 74 miles, and it goes up to 65 miles per hour.
How much does it weigh?
I think it was 150.
Okay, I'll take one too.
Yeah.
The problem is any of the things that are expensive enough that they would fit into a money isn't an issue category, I can't lift them.
Yeah. Well, so my last one was classified government documents because those are for sale.
Yeah, but then you're going to have a hitman come and kill you.
Yeah, for
immediately.
sure. For sure. But maybe I'd do this at the very end of my life. But I would read through them very meticulously and then expose everything that wasn't like a national security thing. Like let people know how badly they're getting fucked by.
I think they would deliver the documents with like poison on them.
Well, the person who's selling the documents, I don't think they care because they just want the money.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to get to the point of revealing the info. I think they would stop you.
I don't know about that.
Anyway.
I think everything is for sale.
Or, okay, wait, I've got another that I want. I want to go, where is it? The Tower of London where they keep all the crown jewels.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go there with a shopping cart, like a Trader Joe's shopping basket, and I want the locks taken off everything.
Sure.
I want all the tiaras. I want all the fancy crown jewels. I'm going to show up to the podcast
All blinged
decked out in the nicest Princess Diana stuff.
Would you still want that stuff, assuming there was no resale value?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
wear it every day.
Okay. Are you a precious gem sort of gal?
I am a precious
Have
gem.
you informed Garrett what sort of rock you're looking for?
Yeah, every day.
What is it?
Every day. I want the rectangle shape and the radiant
diamond?
cut. Yeah.
Okay.
And the one that's shaped like a rectangle and it's radiant cut, so it's got like it looks like narrow lines.
Mm.
I think that one's the prettiest.
Nice.
Yeah, I've gotten really annoying.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so he made the mistake. Well, we're gonna go down this tangent. If you're gonna ask, he made the mistake of saying one time he joked that he would wait until 2024 as like a way to like rile me up,
Yeah.
which says 2023 is when it's happening. Otherwise, you're dumb for making those jokes.
Yeah.
And then when I started being annoying in the summer, he said, "But you like your fall outfits better." So that tells me fall, which we're now in. I told him that the first day of September that we're now in fall.
Yeah.
His parents.
Is it going to happen this weekend?
I don't know. His parents just came to visit, and so I thought it would be a great time to do it while his
Yeah.
parents were here. So every time I was picking an outfit, I was like, "What do you think of this outfit? What do you think of?" And he was getting so annoyed. But now I've started telling him that I consider November to be winter.
Yeah, sure. You got to put firm constraints on that.
I just like this is really fun for me
Yeah.
right now.
I proposed to Jenna under a yellow aspen tree, so it's a good time of the year for that.
Yeah. And also, I think you can't build up all these expectations and then not do it in fall.
Yeah. It's going to happen this weekend, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't think so because it's someone's going away camping trip.
He doesn't
And
wanna steal the
he
thunder.
doesn't even know if I'm going. I
Yeah.
haven't even officially said I'm going.
Or like if you guys stop at like Wendy's on the way and like you're walking out of the bathroom, he's on one knee.
So here's where I'm confused is that I took my second hike with him of our relationship this past weekend when his parents were here. The first one was the last time they were here. Like the guy doesn't.
You only hike with him when his parents are in town?
He just doesn't like to hike, and I'm
Okay.
not going to make him. I can go do that stuff, with Fireball or on my own.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, where are you going to do this that I'm not going to be suspicious? Because we've been spending all our time by the pool because we have this pool now.
Yeah.
Until it closes. And you're not going to want to just randomly go to the mountains one day. I'm going to read through that like a.
Have you been snooping through his stuff?
No.
Yeah. Have you checked his call log to see if he's talked to your dad?
No. Like I'm not gonna be a jerk about it.
Yeah.
I'm just in that I'm really annoying phase.
Okay, good.
But yeah, so maybe when this comes out, we'll have an update.
Yeah.
If not, I'm only going to get worse. I'm going to get so bad.
Oh, I love this. Cool. That was the triple crown of that.
Yes.
I won't even repeat it. Doing a new segment.
Yes.
This one is called, this might be a one-off. We'll see. But
okay, yeah.
The idea came to me. It was funny at the time. We'll see how funny it actually is. The segment is called Triggering the Internet.
Yeah.
And this is where you say things that are inflammatory without being offensive. And the listener is in on the joke because you, with the full context, you know that we're saying things that we either believe or don't believe. That doesn't even really matter. And these will be cut up for social clips to be run on Backpacker Radio's Instagram.
With no context.
No context added. And we'll see the response that we get.
Yeah, so this is a group laugh. Everyone who is listening to this is in on the joke. So we're just going to say things that we think would just like really trigger the comment section of our Instagram profile. And then Sarah is going to just cut the part that is us saying something triggering. And then all of us are going to get to laugh at the people who don't actually listen, but follow us, which we're very appreciative of, getting triggered by this thing out of context.
Yeah. It's like people who read the headline of an article without reading the article. And oftentimes editors will just make it as inflammatory as possible just to get you to click on it.
Yeah. So what are you going to trigger the internet with?
So I think that Taylor Swift is honestly badly overrated. I don't think that she's that talented of an artist. The whole Swiftie culture thing, I don't understand it. I understand she writes her music. The songs are whatever.
Okay. Good cut point. Good cut point. I like that. We can't do 2 in 1 week, though. Otherwise, we'll get suspicious.
You don't want to do one? Is you're just hanging me out to dry?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'll do the next one.
Should we have a code for people who actually listen to comment on the post?
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree with Zach wholeheartedly. No matter how big of a Swiftie you are, like, we did the Triple Crown of Taylor Swift songs. And now it's what I've been listening to and from the podcast because I want to just hear all those songs now. So, but for the sake of the joke, agree. Because the people that are Swifties that don't know that all of us in on it Swifties are joking about this are going to get twice as mad to see other people agreeing.
Yeah. Who's more intense, the Swifties or the Bayhive?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe we'll do the Bayhive next, but yeah.
That would be like, wow.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest Taylor Swift listener by any stretch, but I recognize her talent. She's incredible. So just letting that be known. be gentle on me. Let's go to mailbag.
All right, mailbag. On a recent show, 217, why can't I read words? Badger and Chance raised the question if it was illegal to ride a horse drunk. Apparently it is, as an arrest was made in California with the horse rider being charged with a DUI. See article for more details. Bill.
I'll do the quick excerpt here. Drunk horse rider arrested for DUI in California. This is from Merced, California. This is shout out to local12.com is the article that I'm reading. A horse rider in Merced was arrested after they were caught being under the influence. According to the California Highway Patrol, officers spotted someone taking Seabiscuit. I'm assuming that's not the name of the horse.
It can't be the real horse.
Yeah. No, definitely not the actual Seabiscuit. Out for a stroll. This is like when someone calls your dog Fido or something kind of derogatory.
Right.
Out for a stroll with an open alcohol container. After speaking with an officer, it became apparent that the rider on the horse was under the influence of alcohol. That's when they were arrested for DUI. Is there anything else? No, that you get the gist. So yeah, I want to get some of the more intimate details of this story. Like, was he pissing off the side of the horse? What was he doing to reveal that he was intoxicated?
Maybe I would take a little nap while I was up there.
But apparently this was big enough news that we had multiple people send this email to it or send this link to us. So thank you to Bill. There was another person that sent it to us. Thank you to that person as well. 5-star review.
Yes, this is from Uber Fatty Pufferfish. Best banter ever. Absolutely love your podcast. They are very entertaining and the content is great. The banter you two have is the best of any podcast I listen to. Playing it back at 1.75 speed makes you seem even more witty. I haven't heard the
Should we talk really fast?
That would be like Gilmore Girls. They have like the highest words said per minute. I think of like maybe all TV shows.
Yeah, the daughter speaks very quickly.
So does the mom.
She's like a rapper. Like Eminem.
I haven't heard the tie between Badger and Wisconsin yet, but I'm from Wisconsin, so maybe I enjoy that brand of humor. Show your shirt to the camera.
Oh, yeah. That was not planned.
Johns, your vibe is outstanding. I predict you will go far as a talk show hostess. Love that. Had an idea for you. Perhaps you could change the poop stories to free the anaconda stories. It's a little less vulgar, and it would give environmentalists something to support. Ha ha. And Rachel, in her red font, gave us the note. I don't know actually if Rachel or Mara wrote this, but they said, please note the anaconda reference for this snake episode. I'm pretty proud of myself.
The ability of our team to match up the categories and themes is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Sticker code.
It's got to be something snaky.
Yeah. How about freeing the anaconda?
Sure.
Okay. Something to do with freeing the anaconda in the comments of this post that goes through Instagram.
We need Pauly to play out this episode to the Nicki Minaj version of Anaconda. Do you have that song?
Yeah. I have 7
You know
seconds
that
of it.
song, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the original, but it's honestly, I think it's great.
It's is it the big what sample is it? It's a popular sample.
Baby Got Back.
Yeah, that's right.
Sir Mix-a-Lot.
I'm not hooked up, so we're just gonna have to. Yeah, so every heterosexual guy or homosexual lady, I imagine, has seen that music video. It might be enough to entice you to go watch it. It's good.
It's a great song to hike to.
Yeah, and a great video to experience. Super big thank you to our Chuck Norris Award winners on Patreon. That is Alex and Misty with Navigators Crafting, Andrew, Austin McDaniel, Austin Ford, Braden Blair. Oh, thanks to Austin for stopping by on a recent episode. Braden Blair from 13 Adventures, Brent Stenberg, Brian Alsop,
Fables,
Christopher Marshburn, Coach from Marion Outdoors, Dane,
Ish,
Derek Cook, Do Good Pantry, Eric Casper,
The Friendly Ghost,
Eric Hoffman, Greg McDaniel,
may you bring honor to his name,
Liz Seeger, Matt Sukup, Mike Poisel, Patrick Ciancialo, Sawyer Products, Spam, Timothy Hahn,
Solo,
and Tracy Trigger. Fans. You can follow us on Backpacker Radio on TikTok and Instagram. I can't believe TikTok's still kicking.
Of course it is. I'm kind of getting more into the idea of it. I know it's really late.
I think you've been into it for a minute.
Well, watching, yes, but like with these like recent like videos that we could do for us.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of grasping.
Because you put out a video for a new sponsor, Element.
Yes.
And that.
I made a Packing Mims's resupply box video.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel too much embarrassment making it.
Good.
So.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. At Backpacker Pod on X, Facebook.com/Backpacker Radio. You can follow Chauncey.
You can find me on Instagram at Juliana_Chauncey, and you can get my book Hiking from Home, a long distance hiking guide for family and friends on Amazon.
Appalachian Trails and Pacific Crest Trails. If you're prepping for either of those trails, please subscribe and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on YouTube. We are doing video stuff. What's up?
Hello, Internet.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the Backpacker Radio Tumblr. And if you want to see one in your hand, submit a poop story. And that's it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening, and happy hiking.
Bye.